Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. The two greatest, most important things to concern yourself with are the Supreme Court victories before November. We've had four major victories thus far. We'll have a fifth with the overturning of the unconstitutional New York conviction. A state cannot convict anyone on federal charges without the federal government involved. In this case, the Department of Justice and the FEC dropped the hush money case. Former FEC chairmen have stated Trump could have paid Stormy with dollar bills. It would have been completely legal. Furthermore, the FEC did not level any federal charges against Trump. It's extremely unconstitutional. A state cannot decide what a federal crime is without the federal government involved. Hit subscribe. We're going to get to the Supreme Court victories. You could type in Trump Supreme Court win, ACLU, BBC, ABC, Associated Press, NBC News. These are all of the major victories. Immunity, overturning the Colorado ban, limiting the sentencing for the January defendants. Arizona victory just recently, the other day, regarding documentation needed to choose your president. You can read about that. And then the fifth one will be overturning the absurd, unconstitutional guilty verdict. Furthermore, it wasn't an FEC crime. Former FEC chairman Hans A. von Spakovsky, Bradley Smith, and Trey Traynor have all stated, had they been able to testify when they were not, they would not have even indicted Trump, much less convict him. The stock market, unfortunately, is about to collapse. There is a financial crash within the next couple of months, I predict. Likely before November, but possibly simply before November, before 2025. Hit subscribe right now. Let's get started. Again, the Supreme Court and the stock market, those are the two primary indicators for who wins in 2024, and I believe Trump has it 95% chance he wins.
Okay, if they were price gouging, wouldn't the profit margin be 30% instead of 1.2%? I mean, this whole thing is absurd. The Washington Post directly cited communism about this in its story, saying it's hard to exaggerate how bad this is, that it's going to lead to shortages, black markets, and hoarding. Let's bring in for his reaction, former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, Kevin Hassett. Kevin, always wonderful to see you, sir. When you saw this plan, what was your reaction?
Honestly, I was horrified. This is incredibly chilling. A lot of the sort of reasonable Democratic economists, like my good friend Jason Furman, are out there saying, well, they're not really going to do it. But if you look at Kamala Harris's record, she's for Medicare for all, so you can't have your health insurance. She wants everybody to have a guaranteed job. She's got all these socialist policies that she's been walking back over the last couple of weeks. And now they come out, now you know why they don't let her speak in public. She comes out with the craziest, silliest, and most economically illiterate proposal in the history of presidential politics. And honestly, she wants the government to set prices, and she really wants them to. That's the chilling thing. If she becomes president, this is going to be policy. You're going to go to the grocery store, and then it won't be there, or if it is there, the shelves will be empty. That's what happens when the government sets prices.
If it costs you about $150 every time you go to the grocery store, or $100 or $200, double that. That's not hyperbole. That's not fear-mongering. Just double that. They don't even have a functioning primary. Ask Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden. They're going to fix the price of diesel fuel and bread and eggs and milk. I mean, they're not even competent enough to choose a nominee. But they think they're competent enough to do something no economist has ever been able to do. There's not ever been an economic system or economist that has been able to decide the price of even eggs or milk. It's not possible, because you end up 100% of the time with shortages. Ask anyone who lived in the former Soviet Union.
wrote a chapter in the economic report of the president, or my staff did, when I was in the White House, that showed that when the government starts setting food prices, then that's when people start having famines and stuff, because the people who produce food can't afford to do so because the government pays them less than the cost. It's just terrible.
I mean, it's being called remarkably, absurdly idiotic, breathtakingly idiotic. And it took her 4 years to come up with this. I mean, this is after her running mate, Tim Walz, called socialism, quote, neighborliness. You know, she's copying Senator Elizabeth Warren, you know, Bernie Sanders. Kevin, the irony today is grocery giant Kroger just promised to cut prices by $1 billion after its merger with Albertsons. Let me back up. Let's watch Catherine Rampell of the Washington Post on this and listen to former President Trump. Watch this.
What that would mean, which basically says, like, it's not going to be markets, it's not going to be supply and demand that's determining how much your grocery store charges you for milk or for eggs. It's going to be some bureaucrat in DC, which seems like totally unworkable, first of all, for the FTC to be deciding like how much Kroger charges for eggs in Michigan. But it also would be very bad for markets. We've seen this kind of thing tried in lots of other countries before: Venezuela, Argentina, the Soviet Union, etc. It leads to shortages. It leads to black markets. You know, plenty of uncertainty.
Now Kamala is reportedly proposing communist price controls. She wants price controls. And if they worked, I'd go along with it too, but they don't work. They actually have the exact opposite impact and effect. But it leads to food shortages, rationing, hunger, dramatically more inflation. Their Inflation Reduction Act, by the way, was a disaster. It's what caused the inflation. Their Inflation Reduction Act was a con job. They actually admitted that it wasn't really for inflation that they did it.
Yeah, it was for climate change. You know, price.
So here's what this election is going to be about. Okay, this is what November is going to be about. Food shortages, price controls, higher interest rates, higher inflation, global calamities in terms of foreign policy, and a terrible economy, potential, I think likely market collapse, stock market collapse, or voting for Trump. And then so that's if you vote for Harris. Voting for Trump, Hollywood will be very upset with you. Your wonderful, highly educated, morally superior, liberal Democratic Party friends will be very upset with you. And voting for a better economy, better foreign policy, no price controls, lower inflation, lower prices at the pump and at the grocery store, hopefully lower interest rates on mortgage rates. Your mortgage payments will be less every month. But again, this is the first generation of Americans where over half the electorate care more about Trump's personality than their financial security or their financial future. And that's not hyperbolic either. It's true. It's true. You're making a decision. People have been making a decision. And 4 years ago, they made a decision. They said, yeah, we think Trump is better on the economy. We don't like him, though. It's the first time in American history that Americans, half of the country, just said, I would rather have a worse off economy as long as I don't have somebody that I dislike. It's unheard of.
Price fixing is already illegal. You know, Kevin, what's next? Price controls on car insurance, baby food, pet food.
Oh, sure.
I mean, all are up double digits under Biden and Harris.
Right. Well, the fact is that Harris's proposal is modeled after proposal.
Look at this. Gas is up 50%, electricity up 30%, fuel, oil 49%, airfare 22%, groceries are up 21%, although it seems like a lot more. Eating out is up 23%, car insurance up 54%, rent up 22%, and then young people complaining about rent, they still vote for Democrat. The Democrats, you're worse off economically. Food. So rent is up a lot more, I think, than 22%, but you're paying, instead of $1,000, let's say for a very, very small apartment, and not in a blue state, but someplace in the country that, is 1,000. You're paying 1,200, 1,300, all because you didn't like Trump's personality.
Proposal by Elizabeth Warren that's so open-ended that the government could basically set the price for everything. And so if you think that this is just something that's going to take the far left people and make sure that they're ready to vote for her, no, this is a serious proposal. In fact, while she's out there talking about this price gouging, she's also bragging about the price setting that the government has done in the prescription drug space. And my colleague Thomas Phillipson wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal a few days ago that showed that because of the price fixing of the Biden-Harris administration, then millions of seniors are going to lose their drug benefits. You could go through that article and see about how that works. But she's bragging about having fixed other prices, and she's, copying a bill that wants to fix every price.
Well, she wasn't picked by Democrat primary voters, so this is what the party is stuck with: absolute abject stupidity. Kevin, if you could please just stay with us for just a bit more. We got to get to this story. Okay, coming up next, turning to this. Harris also said the government should subsidize housing with even more of your money. Didn't that get the U.S. into the...
Mortgage rates are over double, okay? It's not difficult to understand. On the far left, there's all this ideology and rhetoric rooted within this moral code, but it's very immoral. The ideology on the left is extremely immoral and unethical because it ignores reality, the reality of mortgage rates. If you asked a left-leaning pundit, well, what are mortgage rates now? They won't tell you. They won't know. What were mortgage rates under Trump? They won't tell you. They won't know. They don't care. Okay? Mortgage rates under Trump were like 3% or less. Under Harris and Biden, it's 6 to 7%, over double. They don't care. They don't care. Don't you get it? They don't even not only do they not understand the simple concept of, like, they don't, a lot of them, the far left pundits, they'll care about it when they buy a mansion, okay, because they're very wealthy. But more often than not, you will never, ever, on a left-leaning, progressive, liberal channel or pundit, they will never bring up mortgage rates. They'll bring up all the morality, and they're highly moral, and they're highly educated, and Trump is this and that, and they'll bring up euphemisms, and they're in their own fantasy world of words that have been redefined, and euphemisms, which is what George Orwell called verbal refuse. But they will not bring up mortgage rates. They won't bring up inflation at the grocery store. They won't bring up strategic petroleum reserves. They won't bring up the cataclysmic foreign policy. They will in certain respects, but they won't blame Democrats. Anyway, let's continue. It's today's left, the ideology of today's left-leaning, viewpoint is extremely immoral because it makes people worse off economically. People suffer a great deal more under Biden, Harris, and Democrats than they did under Trump. And you could point to Trump's last year in office. It's like, that's disingenuous, and that's also a lie. Trump did not want to shut down economic activity for a year and a half, 2 years. That was a policy of the Democratic Party. That was a consensus of experts, carefully crafted and manicured to ensure that any dissent was ignored by kicking people off of then Twitter. But anyway, let's continue.
The banking and financial crisis triggering the Great Recession in 2008. More of this same poison? It's so dumb. Grady Trimble standing by live in D.C. with more. Grady.
Hey, Liz, Vice President Harris says this plan she laid out today will help get 3 million homes built in the next 4 years to bring down the cost to buy or rent a home. Here's some of what's in that plan: a tax incentive for building starter homes, a $40 billion fund to spur housing construction. She wants to cut red tape, stop Wall Street investors from bulk buying homes, and she wants to help with first-time home buyers' down payments.
The only thing I actually kind of agree with is the major corporations buying, hundreds of homes all at once. But even that, I don't know how you'd stop. But tax incentive, if mortgage rates are still at 6 to 7%, and the price of diesel and oil and gas go up, so okay, and then consumer demand goes down, and you have people who can't afford to buy a home in blue cities in large blue states. And let's say there's a recession on the horizon, which there is. You could do all of these things. Not going to help. You're just spending more money. You're spending more money, which creates more inflation, which is the reason that consumer demand within the housing market and commercial real estate will dry up. And by the way, these are the same people who say eviction moratorium. So which one is it? You want people to invest in real estate, and also you want an eviction moratorium. Which one is it?
While we work on the housing shortage, my administration will provide first-time home buyers with $25,000 to help with the down payment on a new home. We can do this. We can do this.
We can do this, and it will do nothing to help anyone, really. Because if mortgage rates are close to 7%, and we enter into a recession, then what happens? Then you lower interest rates, then inflation goes back up. The only reason interest rates are this high is because inflation is a huge problem still. Very huge problem. Then what happens when oil goes up? So, and then in major cities like New York, LA, you can give $25,000. That's because of the mortgage rates being double. You're looking at maybe 3, 4, 5 months. What happens to the next 30 years of the mortgage, or 15 years? So anyway, let's continue.
She says we can do this, but there are questions about whether Harris could if elected, because a lot of these proposals would require congressional approval. They'd also likely lead to more government spending and maybe more inflation, according to some folks, including investor and author David Bahnsen. Here's what he says. Giving people $25,000 to buy a home does not make a home price cheaper. It makes a home cost, well, about $25,000 more. Points out the housing affordability crisis is on the supply side. Feeding more demand with increased deficit spending, he says, is the opposite of what this situation calls for. And at his press conference last night, former President Trump said he'll tackle the housing crisis by opening up federal lands to build houses, getting rid of unnecessary regulations, and improving supply chains. And by the way, Liz, the Harris proposal also includes opening up federal land, so maybe some bipartisan support there, although Republicans are blasting the rest of it. Liz.
Thank you, Grady Trimble. Okay, let's welcome to the show the CEO of American Majority, Ned Ryan, and we're welcoming back Kevin Hassett. Thanks, gentlemen, both. Ned, your reaction to that new agenda of Harris?
Well, apparently we're not going to address what caused all this inflation in the first place. Obviously, they're out of control government spending, printing up money like it's monopoly money, the rising cost of fuel because of their obsession with the global warming hoax. And their response to all of this is, we caused inflation. We're going to try and fix inflation with more things that caused inflation. Liz, it's absolute insanity. But I guess this is what you get when you have two neo-Marxists at the top of the ticket. The crazy part to me, Liz, is we literally have two neo-Marxists at the top of the Democratic ticket, and I'm sitting here wondering, why did we even fight the Cold War if we're going to accept these ideas, this ideology as legitimate as though it belongs in U.S. politics? But incredible to me that Kamala Harris hasn't done anything for 4 weeks since this political coup to take out President Biden as their nominee, and her first and best offer is her economic offer, and it's communism, plain and simple.
Yeah, what Ned just said. Kevin, let's listen to Kamala Harris today, admitting, inflation did take off on their watch. They hit the gas on $2.7 trillion in new spending. She was a tie-breaking vote in the Senate on that. The spending is more than double Barack Obama's 2009 spending bonanza, the Journal says. Watch this.
A loaf of bread cost 50% more today than it did before the pandemic.
I wonder whose fault that is. What presidency did we have for 4 years? The past 4 years.
Ground beef is up almost 50%.
Ooh, she's admitting it. What do you think? And now she wants to let $3.4 trillion in Trump's tax cuts expire next year? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think that she understands what causes inflation. But to go to the housing thing, she promised that she would build or help subsidize the building of 3 million new homes. Well, one of the things that's been driving housing inflation up so much, it's actually gone up more than overall inflation, is the open border. So there are 5, 6, 7 million people who need a place to stay who are moving into places all over the country and driving up prices. And so if you think about it, the 3 million that she wants to build won't even cover the 5 million illegals that she's let across the border. She absolutely doesn't understand what causes inflation. And the way to think about it is that there's this balloon inflating because of the runaway government spending. And she doesn't like this part of the balloon, so she's putting her finger in it and pushing it back in. But, the balloon's still growing. It's just terrible, terrible policy. But this is going to come back to bite them because this is so obviously stupid. Even Joe Biden knows that this doesn't make any sense. Okay. Yeah. And everybody on the left that has a brain is going to back away from this thing because this is sheer craziness.
Even, Obama's top economist, Jason Furman, said this makes no sense, what she's talking about.
He's a good man.
Yes, he is. We got to move on to this other story, Ned. For the first time ever, House Oversight is probing a vice presidential candidate. Oversight Chair James Comer sent a letter to the FBI asking for information on the 30 trips that Kamala Harris's running mate, Tim Walz, took to China since 1993. Now, China paid for some of these trips. He also, they're saying he set up an LLC to do these trips to China. And Walz is also a fellow at the Macau Polytech University. Ned, that's a Chinese front that says it has a devotion to the Communist Party. And he spoke alongside the president of a Chinese organization.
So there's no emphasis on why interest rates are high. It's because of mismanagement by Biden and Harris. But the cognitive dissonance is too much. Democrats cannot admit that Biden and Harris caused this inflation by spending on things like the Inflation Reduction Act that didn't work, that only caused more inflation. That's why if the Inflation Reduction Act worked, it was passed a year ago, then you would have interest rates already cut. Interest rates haven't been cut because inflation is still a major issue, keeps going up.
Ronald Reagan, of course, made cutting taxes the centerpiece of his campaign for president back in 1980. And yes, he made good on his promise once elected, signing into law what was then the largest tax cut in history. This time around, as we've been talking about, Kamala Harris campaigning on raising taxes for many Americans, including boosting the top income tax rate to 39.6% and raising the corporate tax from 21 to 28%. Yikes. Joining me now, Heritage Foundation economist, former Trump economic advisor, Steve Moore. I mean, Steve, there couldn't be more dramatic opposing views on how this economy should be run. Look, I just mentioned to Jim Urio there, Steve, look, what would happen? This tax on realized gains. I mean, the taxes on the so-called rich, and it's always the middle class that ends up getting socked the most. I mean, this is dangerous stuff, is it not?
It sure is. And, I did live through the Reagan era. I came to Washington, D.C. in 1984 and actually had the privilege of my life of working in the Reagan administration for Ronald Reagan. And you're right. Here's an amazing statistic. When Reagan came into office, actually, the top income tax rate in the United States was 70%. 70%. When he left office, the highest rate was 28%. That's a very dramatic reduction in taxes. And yet, guess what happened to tax revenues?
Tell me.
They went up. They went way up.
There you go.
And the rich paid more taxes. Yeah, and by the way, there's a curve behind this that you know about, actually. It's called the Laffer curve. Sometimes when you can cut tax rates, you get more economic activity, more investment, the economy does better, you get more revenues. Now, I want to make this point because it's relevant to RFK Jr., who has endorsed Donald Trump. The other big tax cutter of modern times, of course, was John F. Kennedy. When he came into office, the highest tax rate was 90%. He slashed the tax rates across the board. Yeah. He was very famous for saying that that when tax rates are too high and tax revenues are too low, we have to cut the rates to make the economy grow faster. So if Reagan got that and John F. Kennedy got that, why can't Kamala Harris understand that concept?
That's very true. I mean, the Democratic Party today was not what it was under JFK.
Exactly.
That is for sure.
That's true.
I think that party is a moderate Republican these days. Anyway, listen, you say that the American dream, sadly, out of reach for most Americans. Why is that, and how can we change it?
Because, when you define the American dream, it's a lot of things, but one of the hallmarks of the American dream is being able to afford a home. And you look at the numbers.
Mortgage rates, that is something that I don't understand why more Americans aren't concerned with. They used to be 3% or less. Now they're close to 7%. So I don't get it. I just don't 6.5% to 7%. I just don't get it. Why don't people focus on that? And why don't Democrats admit that this all happened under their watch? Well, they can't admit that. So then they want to give $25,000 to first-time home buyers, while at the same time allowing millions and millions of people to enter the country, which, look, I feel for families that want a better life. I get it. I understand. But you are increasing the demand, thus increasing the price of homes when there's zero vetting process and you're letting millions and millions of people into the country.
Now, but I have two sons that are in their early 30s. They're about the stage of their life where they'd be looking at, buying a home and starting a family. You can't do that. They couldn't. And by the way, they're middle class. They're doing pretty well, actually. They couldn't possibly afford to buy a house. I mean, now with these high mortgage interest rates, you just cannot buy a house today. And that's true of people in their 30s and 40s where they're just priced out of the market. The average, because of Biden's policies and the massive increase in costs and interest rates, a 30-year mortgage, you're going to pay payments almost twice as high today as you did when Donald Trump was president. Do we really want 4 more years of that?
30-year mortgage rates, I'm reading here, 7.07%. It's 7%. Okay? 10-year, 7.4%. But a 30-year fixed is 7.7%. It was 3% under Trump. That alone should force people to vote for Trump.
Yeah, no kidding. Very quickly, Steve, the August jobs report out next Friday. Could be a game changer for the Fed. What are you expecting?
Well, I've given up guessing because, as you know, the Labor Department over the last year and a half has overestimated the jobs by over 1 million. Did you know that? 1.1 million overestimation of jobs. So we keep I keep going on with Maria in the morning, and we got 325,000 jobs, and then the next it was 250, 225. Yeah. So I don't have a clue where we're going to be, but I do think the economy is slowing down.
Okay. Well.
I am proposing that we change the tax code so for every family that is making less than $100,000 a year, they will receive a tax credit that they can collect up to $500 a month, which will make all the difference between those families being able to get through the end of the month with dignity and with support or not. And on day one, I will repeal that tax bill that benefits the top 1% and the biggest corporations of America. And I actually feel very strongly about this.
I don't even know what that means. If a family that makes less than $100,000 a month, a year, because of a new tax code, they'll get $5,000 a year. A month, or $500 a month. How does that work? I don't know how that works. That actually sounds good, but I don't understand how it works.
That we need to have Medicare for all. Having a system that makes a difference in terms of who receives.
So why isn't she bringing up single-payer healthcare, Medicare for all now? Oh, that's right, because that's the entire left is a racket. Look, the channel's growing. I'm at 266,000 subscribers. It's because of you. God bless you all. It's because of you people around the world. I love you and I appreciate you very much. Look, if there's a person that stumbles upon this at this point in the live stream or the upload, and they're like, oh my God, H.A. Goodman, he's a Trumper now. I respectfully say this to anyone on the left, still on the left watching, who remembers that I was on the left myself. The Democratic Party, or I should say, the progressive movement, or the socialist or communist ideologies, the far left in this country and around the world, really, it's a gigantic racket. Nobody believes any of the policies. It's a racket predicated upon political power and a false sense of a warped and twisted morality that does not correlate to reality. It's immorality because it doesn't correlate to actual reality. And case in point, Medicare for all, single payer. How many pundits engaged in campaign finance violations? We won't get into that. Raising money for single payer healthcare. They never, ever, 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 ever were interested in single payer healthcare. No, not even Bernie Sanders is. It's a racket. It's not even feasible, number one, but it's not even possible on a state level. There's no state single payer healthcare. They want it for the entire country. And they don't really want it because they haven't passed it even when they have the majority in the House for 2 years and the Senate. They say it to funnel left-leaning voters into the if you want to call it liberal, or the Democratic Party establishment. Okay, Democrats have destroyed the Green Party. They've sued RFK Jr. Endlessly. They don't want any threat to their political power and influence. They don't believe in banning fracking. They don't believe in Green New Deal. They don't believe in Medicare for all. It's a racket. It's a deceptive. It's a gigantic deceptive scheme to convince people on the far left, young people especially, idealistic people, that, oh my God, they want a really good system of healthcare that you're not going to get it with 320, 30, 40 million, 60 million people. I don't know how many people do we have in this country now. Who knows? Okay, it works for a much smaller nation in Europe that doesn't have doesn't have the military budget that we have. The Democrats continuously push for. So you're not going to get banning fracking. Bernie Sanders doesn't believe in banning fracking. He doesn't believe in Medicare for all. AOC doesn't believe in the Green New Deal that she sponsored. They don't believe in any of these things. It's an overtly deceptive tool to convince impressionable, idealistic, good people, very good. There's a lot of good people on the left to just vote Democrat. And then one day, I remember, I don't have Twitter, I don't have Facebook, but like 5 years ago, I remember people arguing, losing friendships over, my Medicare for all plan is better than yours. It's you might as well play Dungeons and Dragons and like pretend you're fighting, some kind of monster. They will never implement. Democrats have zero intention to implement Medicare for all, Green New Deal, banning fracking, packing the courts. What other lie did they tell people? And then they say Trump lies. Nobody, no political side lies more than the adversaries going after Trump. Anyway, let's continue.
Receives what based on your income is unconscionable, it is cruel, and in many situations that I have witnessed, inhumane.
That's Kamala Harris' 2019 campaign for.
So in Democrats, unconscionable, it's cruel. It's unconscionable and cruel. Like the atrocities taking place in the southern geographic region of our country where this human being was the quote-unquote czar. It's unconscionable. The conscience of the wonderful, morally superior liberal Democrat revolves around disliking and opposing Trump and all his good economic policies and great foreign policy, and sensibilities. They want to feel good. People on the left look in the mirror. I feel great. I'm fighting against the quasi-new reincarnation of everything bad in Trump. They make up these euphemisms. They live within a world of euphemisms devoid of reality, where interest rates and mortgage rates are through the roof, inflation is through the roof, and people struggle financially directly because of their policies, because they push to shut down economic activity. Then they push for an eviction moratorium. Now they're trying to address the housing crisis after they pushed for the eviction moratorium and then prevented people from working. So anyway, it's a whole bunch of nonsense. But like I said, the Supreme Court, but we can't have a good economy. Why? Because Trump is mean. He's a threat to democracy. So we must have a bad economy. And if you want to barbecue under Harris and Waltz, Waltz is a good one. Do you want to know why they picked Waltz? Because Waltz speaks like a good, a salt of the earth, good Midwestern person. Reminds you almost of Biden and good Midwestern people. Biden when he could speak. Almost like a Jimmy Stewart type of person. And if a Jimmy Stewart type of person is voting for the terrible policies of the Democratic Party, really high inflation and high interest rates and mortgage rates through the roof, and a terrible militant foreign policy, well, then maybe you should. And you should oppose Trump, too. Because Tim Walz is a good salt-of-the-earth person. Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe. Thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow. Paul, everyone here, thank you so very, very much. You are all awesome, ladies and gentlemen. John, thank you. Paul, thank you. To my super chat, thank you. I will, yes, Renee, I will turn the sound up, and thank you for watching in Denmark. I love Denmark, by the way. I love Denmark for a number of reasons. I'll get to another day, but I love Denmark. Thank you, Renee. I will turn the sound up.